In order to define the concept of the university for my project, I'm going to be focusing on a couple of core tenets that make up the way that the neoliberal university functions currently. The first one is understanding that the university, especially as it exists in the United States, is an accumulation of stolen land, of knowledge, of resources, and of labor. And in order to do anything within the context of the university, you have to know that like any moves that you make exist in this landscape of like accumulated resources that you have to be able to use. The second is that the university strives for this historical amnesia where they want you to forget the white supremacist like foundations of the university, but also in the more present term, especially when it comes to things like student activism and the fight for ethnic studies, there's this call for forgetting what's happening so that as there's student turnover and as faculty are denied tenure, etc., and forced to leave, the university can exploit this amnesia and go back on its promises of creating departments and things like that would take resources for more radical movements. And finally, there's this idea of the university as corporate and neoliberal. This comes up in Kathy Schlenweil's chapter in the book Flashpoints of Asian American Studies, where she talks about how through like the liberal institution promoting this idea of like diversity and like multiculturalism in order to gain funding through corporate structures and in order to co-opt the language of like radical student movements from like getting black studies on campuses and things like that, we can understand that the intense marketization of today's university turns it into this like neoliberal institution and neoliberal place. And so understanding those things, the university and academia as a whole are a violent space for everyone, but especially for marginalized student activists. And that's something that I'll be talking a lot about more through the experiences that I've had with the Asian American Initiative, but also in terms of understanding the university and this push for hyper productivity, this push for civility, and for like the entire like neoliberal structure of it forces us into like becoming disabled because of the way that the university functions and the way that the university forces people to keep going, which is also a problem with academia as a whole currently. And with all of that being said, the only thing that we can really like do in the context of the university is take from Fred Moten and Stefano Harney's The Undercommons this idea that the only possible and ethical relationship to the American university right now is to steal from it, to take some of these accumulated resources and use them for projects that undermine the university itself from within the university, or take them to places outside of the university, which is something that is the project of the Davidson Community Fund and was the idea behind Imagining Davidson. So all of these things kind of comprise parts of the neoliberal university as it stands today, and as it stands in the context of student activism as a whole, which you can also see in things like the protests that happened, the student protests that happened in UC Berkeley in 2011 to against like student fee, like tuition fee increases that were shut down by violent police brutality against the students, as well as through like pieces such as the Abolitionist University website that is made up of several scholars who are focused on this idea of like how can we have an abolitionist approach to the university. I'll be linking all of those resources in the website, in the video description below.